welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I'm sitting here with Stinton. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Stinton, you are a rice farmer, you are a hunter, member of the Japan Hunters Association. We can see the beautiful hat here. You've been in Japan for quite a while, and we want to learn a little bit more about how do you become a rice farmer, how do you become a hunter in Japan? And before we get into that, could you maybe introduce yourself a little bit more to our listeners?
Certainly. My pseudonym is Stinton Johnson on Twitter. I'm originally from Canada, Ontario, and I first came to Japan in 1998.
Okay.
That was just a brief visit. I was with my girlfriend, wife now, and climbed Mount Fuji then, really fell in love with the culture. So I came back on exchange in 99 to Kyoto, and I went to Kyoto University Foreign Studies for 1 year of intensive Japanese. That was the best time of my life, really. Kyoto's a gorgeous city. And then after that, I went back and finished uni, graduated in 2001, came back to Japan, found a job in the mountains, working for an NGO there. I was an English teacher at first, and then fate brought me to Yokohama after that, the big city where I moved in with my girlfriend.
Quite a difference from the mountains.
Completely different, completely. And I was actually raised more or less in the city. I'm from a small town, but I've always lived in the city. I've never really lived in the countryside until I reached adulthood. So anyway, Yokohama, I was living for 5 years, worked in Tokyo. And then we had 2 kids. We moved back to Canada in 2006. We lived in Ottawa until 2013. We had another child then. And then we came back to Japan 2013, and we've been living here ever since.
So you've had quite a long history with Japan. And you said your first time was 1998?
Yes.
What kind of made you want to come to Japan at that time?
I was studying Japanese at university, and I guess the impetus behind studying Japanese was that I wanted to get intimately familiar with a certain culture and language. And it just so happens that the Japanese program at my uni was very, very robust. It had a lot of good teachers, a lot of decent classes. So I just naturally kind of gravitated towards that. And it could have radically gone different. I could have, studied Russian or something else, but no, it just kind of my path.
It kind of happened to be Japanese. And then your first time coming here, do you still remember what was your first experience, your first touch with Japanese culture? Because it's been over 20 years since your first time here, so it has changed a lot, right? You arrived a few years after the bubble burst, and what was it like?
Well, I guess the most memorable experience from that time would have been climbing Mount Fuji. I climbed with my wife and my father-in-law, and it was a different time back then when you climbed
less
Mount
crowded.
Fuji. Yes, less crowded. Less garbage.
It's a big problem now.
It is a big problem, yeah. Ever since they made it that, what's it called? Like a
UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Right, World Heritage Site. So that was my first run-in with Japan, my first kind of glorious experience. And the rest is really a haze. I really enjoy, actually, no, you know what? There's another event that happened when I was here in 98. I went with my father-in-law and my wife and her mother to my father-in-law's house deep in the mountains, his childhood home.
Like a kominka, traditional one?
Yes, right on the side of the mountain.
Wow.
His parents, they were already passed at the time. So he came from an all-son family, and it was the job of the eldest son to take care of the family home. So it was actually over New Year's. you know how special New Year's is.
Very special.
Yes.
Already they're preparing. We are recording this now end of October. And you can already see a lot of preparations for the new year. Book your New Year's meal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and it's really, because it's a very kind of intimate family thing. So when they took me to his house, his childhood home, and the setting was absolutely breathtaking because, I mean, it's just a humble house, and the bathrooms were outside. It was like literally an outhouse, but it was in the middle of a forest on the side of a mountain, and we had to climb up these long steps to get there, right? So, but the whole family, all his brothers showed up with all of their families as well. So there must have been 25 of us or so.
In the small mountain hut?
Yes.
House?
Yes, house. And they had kotatsu with charcoal, so it wasn't electric. And so yeah, just being able to spend the time with them in that setting over New Year's, and of course getting drunk, and you know, we're quite rowdy. It's a rowdy family. They're all boys, right? So yeah, just that whole experience really drew me in, I guess. When I look back on it, I think that, you know, the importance of family is something that really hit home with me about Japan.
I think that's a beautiful memory to have from
Absolutely.
that first trip to Japan.
It was.
Throughout your kind of back and forth, you moved to Yokohama as well. You were working in a big city in Tokyo. But today you work in a more rural area and you became a rice farmer and hunter. How did that interest kind of happen in this transition?
Yeah, I would say it's a long time coming. I am still working as a freelance translator. I've worked as a freelance translator since 2002. At first, I wanted to translate because I wanted to learn Japanese. I looked at it less of a job and more as a learning opportunity. So I remember when I first started, I was reading the text and I just didn't have the vocabulary, but I forced myself to go through it, forced myself to look up the words in the dictionary.
From Japanese to English?
Yes.
Okay.
And, you know, if I didn't know a kanji, I would, back in those days, 2002, 2003, I was using paper dictionaries to look up words. Now we did have the electronic ones, right?
They're pretty good. If you know how to use them, I've heard they're really, really useful tools.
Absolutely. I mean, but they do have limitations, right? Now I only use the internet exclusively because that's updated all the time. But yeah, I taught myself to use a dictionary to look up kanji, and I was also using a Japanese to Japanese dictionary. And if you can use a Japanese to Japanese dictionary to look up the definitions of the words that you don't know and learn how, get the thought in your mind of what that word is in Japanese, then that's such a big booster for language skills.
So instead of just translating it, you focused on looking at the word and looking at the word in context. And with your existing knowledge, understanding the context to understand how this word is being used.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's a good point. I'm currently still, doing these flashcards for kanji. And then regularly you'll have 3 words to translate it in English into the same. To mind, I had nikumu, to hate. And there's also iyagaru, also to hate, but used in a different context, in a different way, right? Yeah. But if you just learn from the flashcard, you never understand when to use it and how to use it. So
absolutely. Yeah.
For all the Japanese learners, I think that's a very good approach.
It is. Context is everything. So anyway, going back to the whole translation thing, I didn't appreciate it at first, for the first maybe as long as 10 years that I was doing it. So half my career, I looked at it as a way of learning Japanese, but I always pined after doing something else in life. I went to grad school in Yokohama, and then I went to grad school in Canada as well. But I wasn't quite satisfied with that either. So when we came back, well, actually, to take a couple steps back, in Canada, when we went back after living in Yokohama, so from about 2007 to 2012, we lived in the countryside in Canada, and we had a little 4-acre plot of land, and we had a dog and a little tractor and everything, and I was almost like play farming, basically, just trying to get my hands dirty, trying to understand how to work the land, but that kind of inspired in me a love of something that I didn't realize I had, and it was being able to produce things, being able to go from being a consumer, from living in the city and just having things given to you, to be able to make things on your own. So that larger life lesson I kind of carried over in our move back to Japan. And as soon as we came back here, I was out immediately, looking for houses in the countryside, looking for kominka and other things like that, because the countryside life there's just an allure there that I never realized is how beautiful it really is.
So basically, this kind of experience of you going back home and enjoying land and kind of working with it, you brought that back to Japan. But the land here is quite different.
Yes.
I would say Canada is mostly flat, except maybe for the Rockies and maybe further north. But then you came to a very mountainous area, and the thing that is cultivated here the most is rice, which is, as far as I know, not produced in Canada.
I think it might be, but not. There's no. I don't think there's any wet till agriculture.
So,
in Canada.
Why did you choose to get into rice specifically, and how did you actually find a plot of land that you could work?
My current setup of rice farming, I work with or under, is probably more appropriate to say, an old rice farmer in my area, and I was introduced to him by a very resourceful and kind foreigner that lives near me. And the rice farmer was kind enough to allow me to use his machinery and his land that was lying fallow and had laid fallow for many years. So there's a distinct shortage of labor, like farm labor in Japan, right? All the farmers are aging out. There's a lack of younger people coming in to take over. So I think there is an active push to get younger people in to farm.
So a lot of land that can be used for rice farming or other produce is currently just there, not being used.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So he allowed you to use that, which was kind of like a win-win situation, right? Because
Yes.
you wanted land and you didn't need to invest in machinery,
Right.
And he had his land being
Yes.
used for it.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's still a learning process. I'm certainly absolutely no master at rice farming, but I was just talking to Andre about this before we started filming, and it didn't matter how much knowledge I had when I went into doing it. What mattered more is my motivation to do it. And if you have the drive to do it, you can learn as you do it.
So is it something you kind of self-taught yourself, or did the man you were renting the land from help you, teach you, give you advice?
He absolutely helped me, or he is helping me along the way. And it's when you get out in the sticks in Japan, and you have to navigate the dialect of the locals there.
Yes.
And the older generation tends to speak, the men especially, tend to speak a little bit more roughly, a little bit more succinctly in how they express themselves. And there's the inevitable inflection of the dialect, the local dialect. And where I am, luckily, I've gotten used to it because my father-in-law speaks with a similar dialect. And my wife, she's kind of helped me along the way to understand it. Once you get past the initial difficulties of communication with the older generation, you realize that they're very kind and they're very forthcoming in the help and the instruction that they want to give you.
So I don't know much about rice farming. That is to say, I barely know anything about it. Can you run us a little bit through the process? What does a rice farming season look like? Through which steps do you have to go so that at the end you can bring us something like this very delicious looking genmai? So it's a type of unpolished rice that you brought us, which we'll be very happy to cook. But it doesn't start from here, right? So there's a lot of work put into producing this.
There is. Well, I guess it would start with, because it literally is a cycle. So it's difficult to delineate a starting and an ending
Chicken
of rice
and egg.
Cultivation, because they use the previous year's harvest as the seed for the next year's harvest. And there's a whole procedure for how they choose what grains of rice are proper to act as the seed for this to make the seedlings. I don't get involved with that. There are people that specialize in that.
Well, okay.
Yeah. It's quite, there's various specialties along the whole process of rice farming. So I start with the seedlings. So I order seedlings from JA or another individual grower.
So JA is Japan Agriculture Association, kind of the government organization.
I think it might be quasi-government, but JA, you can order rice seedlings from them, and also they offer consultation and a bunch of different services, including planting services, harvesting services, and they're very comprehensive.
So if, for example, you have a very big plot of land and you can't handle it by yourself, at least for the planting or the harvesting, for specific moments you can have like extra labor to help you out.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I do everything myself, but some of the older fellas, they do that. You start by doing a rough till of the land that you're going to plant on. That happens in about April, when the ground has thawed completely, because you don't want to till up frozen ground. So you'll till up the land, and then you'll apply fertilizer. Most people apply chemical fertilizer now, and then you till again. To get the soil in a much more softer consistency. And then you start flooding. You flood the rice fields, and the infrastructure for the water is already there. It's already flowing. And, if you think about it, I always marvel at looking at the water canals that run through the rice fields, because, we have water piped into our house, but it's invisible. You never see the flows and the stalks of water that we use in our our domestic scene. But all of the canals that flood the rice fields, they're all open, and you can see how the water will pool in some areas, how the water behaves as it's flowing down these concrete and stone, in some cases, canals.
Oh, these little canals. If you hike around the countryside in Japan, you usually see a little tiny hill you can walk on, and then you'll have like a small concrete, about 50 centimeter wide, and maybe 50 to 1 meter deep, and then just the water flows.
Yeah, those are generally the rain channels to get the water off the road and just channel it away. But the rice canals, well, they're of a similar nature. We get our water from a nearby river, which there's a main sluice gate that comes off the river. That's, unfortunately, it's owned and operated by TEPCO. Oh, okay. So yeah,
a major corporation in Japan.
Yeah. So if there's heavy rains during there usually always is, it's Tsuyu,
rainy season.
Yeah, in May. So the river, if the water level gets too high, the gate automatically shuts, and then these canals will dry up. And so, you flooded your rice paddy, and then suddenly the water stops flowing. So all of the water in the rice paddy just is absorbed into the ground, and you can't maintain the flooding conditions. So we flood in May, and then we have to do a wet till. They call it shirokaki in Japanese. Shirokaki, shiro is, it means substrate. Kaki is kakimazeru, to stir.
Okay.
So basically what you're doing is you're taking your tractor in and you have a rotary, a fine tooth rotary, much finer than the rough till that you do of the dry soil. And you stir up basically the top few centimeters of the soil underneath the water, and you get it into a fine silt. It acts like self-leveling concrete. So like you almost get it to a pudding consistency. So it all levels out in a very kind of beautiful flat surface by the time you're done your wet till. So that's the final till. And if everything goes as planned and you can maintain the water in the field and it's, TEPCO doesn't shut your water off, then you can plant about a week later. So late May is planting season usually, in my area anyway. I live in Koshin. It's a region, Yamanashi, Nagano, and Niigata.
Like central Japan kind of region.
Yeah. And so planting consists of using, it's a marvelous machine, the rice planter. It's mechanical, and what you do is, I wish I could show you a picture of it right now.
We can probably, if you send one to us, we can probably add it later.
Absolutely, yeah, please do that. It's got very thin wheels that are very high, and they have almost like duck feet.
Oh, I see. So because it has to move through the kind of
mud.
water and muddy.
Yes. So it doesn't sink in and get bogged down. I mean, if you go into mud with a big, thick tractor tire, you can get bogged down pretty easily, right? So these rice planters have these thin kind of duck feet wheels. What you do is you take the nae, the seedlings, the rice seedlings, and you buy them in trays. I think the going price this season was 1,200 yen per tray. And a tray is probably about, it's a standard length. It's something like 50 or 60 centimeters. And then what you do is you take the tray. You can literally lift up the nae like you're pulling someone's hair, right? Okay. And it's all clumped together, the roots. And then you'll take that and you'll drop it down behind you in this machine. And there's you'll see in the picture, but there is a kind of a receiver that you put the nae into, and you push them all the way down. And then at the bottom of the receiver, which is close to the ground, they have little hooks that are mechanical, and they will pick off. You can. The settings are variable. You could.
So you can choose how many you want to.
Yeah. Like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 plants all in the same planting. And it'll pick off those and literally put them into the mud behind you as you go forward.
Traditionally, this was all done by hand.
Yes.
Are there still people doing this by hand, or is it mostly shifted to like a mechanical machinery production?
Well, I mean, they do have some cultural events where they will get people out that just to experience that, right? Maybe people from the city or school kids or something, and they'll get out in bare feet or rubber boots or whatnot, and then they'll put a string line out, and then they'll plant along the string line. So they do that, but it's more for the cultural experience.
It's not sustainable anymore.
It's not productive. It's if productivity is your key and efficiency, then it's just not the best way to do it. But those mechanical planters don't do the whole field. Typically, the corners are the most difficult areas to get. So you'll go in your lines. What you'll do is, it's kind of complex, but you have to go around the perimeter first of your field and draw a line in the mud without planting first, just so you can get your boundaries, because that's your exit. By the time you're done doing your rows, you need an exit to get back out.
Because you can't go over it again, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's like a game where you need to get out of the labyrinth without passing twice by the same area.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And because sometimes the mechanical planters will miss rice. They won't plant it in, or they won't plant it deep enough. If there's a patch of that field that's maybe it's too flat, because if you get too much water in some areas, then the rice will tend to float up on the top. So that's when you need helpers to come in
and check everything.
Yeah, and then replant.
So if you have one field that is, I don't really know the size, what the sizes are, but I guess it's also variable. But for your personal production, can you do, for example, the planting in one day? Do you need a week, or what is the kind of?
No, you could probably. I could do, if I was by myself, I could do planting of a field of about maybe 500 square meters. I could probably do planting in 2 to 3 hours.
Oh, that's fast, I guess.
Yeah. But when I get my wife and my son out there to help me, then it goes a lot faster because they can get out there and put the little...
So you push the machine and go through it, and they can go behind you directly and adjust whatever is needed.
Absolutely.
Teamwork.
Yeah. Teamwork, but you gotta sometimes twist arms to get people out there to help you.
Yeah, it's a tough job, right?
It is.
Especially if you do physically, you're often maybe bent over and you're in the water.
You got the sun beating down on you.
So right now, we got all the way to mid-end May. It's the start of the rainy season. So you've gotten your seedlings. You have tilled the grounds of your land once. You've flooded the land. You tilled it again, and now you just went through with the machinery to plant everything.
Yes.
Now we get into June. What's the next stage in rice production?
June. After you've planted, I'm getting a friend into it right now, rice planting this past season. Him and I were doing the rice together, and I told him that basically it's cruise control after you get it all planted. But that's kind of a lie, because there's a lot of upkeep. You got to keep the weeds down. So I got to go around with the weed whacker and just keep all the weeds down around the perimeter. And then if there's any that pop up in the paddy itself, go and pick those out. And of course, another important step, which I kind of skipped over, after the planting, you have to put fencing around it, at least in my area.
Some animals come to kind of eat the seedlings or the young plants.
Yes. The deer love the young rice seedlings. They're very soft and succulent when you first put them into the ground. It's only probably 3 or 4 weeks after they're planted that they're finally safe from the deer.
3 or 4 weeks, okay.
Yeah, but then you've got to worry about the inoshishi, the boar, because they come later.
To each their own. They have their different preferences.
Yes.
It's like a 2-course meal.
There's animals, there's wildlife that you have to deal with the whole process. Even after harvest, when you hang the rice, the sparrows will come and pick it clean.
From the forest, from the ground, from the air, everyone wants your rice.
Yes, it's free food.
Yeah. So you basically, from June until the harvest, then you just kind of protect your rice, watch it grow, make sure it grows properly.
Yes.
And then you got to harvest.
Yes.
Around what time of the year is a harvest usually?
Depends on how hot the summer was. Obviously, this summer that we just experienced was very hot, so the rice did really well, and I got a better yield than I expected. Taking into account my negligence that I had to a degree this year as well. So it was a pleasant surprise. The hot summers favor a good harvest. So the harvest happens September, October, basically.
Over a course of 2 months.
That's right, yeah. And it's tough. Harvest is a lot of hard work, depending on the methods you use to harvest. You can combine, which is basically you take your combine in and it just mows all of the rice plants, sucks it up, threshes it, puts it in the bag, what's still wet, obviously, and then cuts up the wada, cuts up the straw, the rice straw, the stalks, and shoots it out the back to fertilize your field again. That's one method. It's quick, it's dirty, you pick up stones, you pick up debris and stuff like that. It's it's not the ideal method, right? The other method, besides using a scythe in your hands and binding,
the traditional kind
that's a hell of a lot of work. But the other method, still mechanical, is you'll take a binder. They call it binda in Japanese. You'll take a binder in and you will do the same thing. You'll mow the grass stalks. But at the time that you do it, of course, the field's not flooded anymore. You stop the water probably about 10 days to 2 weeks before you harvest.
Just make sure it's all gone by the time you have to go in.
That's right. Sometimes you have to deal with mud, which makes things a lot more difficult. So you take the binder in and you cut all of the rice, but it has this magnificent mechanical kind of artifice that will kind of bring it all together into a bundle and then wrap it with twine or string and then shoot it out the side. So it'll shoot out all these big bundles of rice plants, rice on the stalk. And what you do after you've cut the whole field, you'll get the little stubs basically that's left over. And what you do is you have to hang that. You have to hang it on these, where I live, they call them haze o kakeru.
Okay.
And they're just pipes.
Yeah, it's like two sticks forming a cross and one pipe placed in between two of those. Kind of like you would hang your clothes, but you hang the rice, basically.
That's right, yeah. They used to use bamboo.
It traditionally used to be.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, around the time I found your work online was when you were in harvest. And when I reached out, you were like, oh, I have to finish the harvest first before I can come, right?
Yes, yeah.
So this is the most physical part of the job.
It's rough. It's really rough. And when you have zansho, when you have that lingering heat from the summer that extends into September, sometimes in October.
Which is getting longer and longer,
It's just so brutal because you're out there bending over, picking up the rice bundles, hanging them on this pipe, patting it down. Rice is really itchy, so you can't do it with short sleeves. You'll be scratching yourself all day afterwards. So you have to wear long sleeves, gloves, wrap your towel around your neck, wear a hat. So you're basically bundled up.
Which is in the heat. The worst.
Yeah. So, this year I felt pretty close to passing out once when I was doing it. That I had to do all of my fields this year using that method because there was a timing conflict. I was planning on combining half of my fields, and then what you do is you send what you've combined out to a dryer. And they use kerosene dryers, and they'll just dry out large batches. If you're out, funny thing is, I saw from the Shinkansen on the way here today, I saw other JA buildings in Nagoya and Kyoto, and they're very tall.
The silos?
Yes.
Kind of,
yeah. But the reason they're so tall is because they have these, what would you call it, like a conveyor or an extruder that draws the rice up all the way to the top of this tower and drops it back down to, it's basically to expand the surface area to dry
air
out.
Dry it.
Yes,
kind of,
absolutely. So that's expensive too. To use a kerosene dryer, my friend harvested probably like 27 bags, something like that. He had to pay like 17,000 yen for the kerosene dryer. So it's not a cheap process, but I mean, it does the job. But after, you've still got this rice and there's still could be debris in it.
So you need to filter it.
You need to filter it, and you need to dehusk it as well. Because when you harvest the rice, it's still in its husk.
So husk is like a kind of protective layer on the rice.
That's right.
Which you don't want to eat, and you cannot.
No, it's plant matter. You can't digest it. Yeah. You've got to dehusk it. So you dehusk it after it's been dried, either in the kerosene dryer, or my method that I did this year was to sun dry it. And so you can dehusk it at either, they have these, I don't know if if they have them in the city or not, but they have what are called seimaiki, rice polishing machines.
I think they have them at stores such as Conan.
Oh, okay.
I do remember going there once. We had my fiance's grandfather has sent us some rice, and it was also kind of unpolished. And Conan has this machine where you basically bring a bag like you've brought us today, and you just empty it in there, and it will just remove and polish it, and then you just get the white rice basically at the bottom.
Yeah. So there's that. But I took my harvest to a guy, and going back to the specialists all on the process. He has an optical scanner, and so I put in like 28 bags.
How many kilos is one bag?
30
kilos for one bag. Okay, that's like nearly 500 kilos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll load up my K truck and take it all to this guy with an optical scanner, back it in, offload all of these 28 bags and dump them into the basin, and it sucks it up, and it husks the rice, passes the husked rice through an optical scanner, which sorts out garbage and debris and stones and whatnot, and then it can grade your rice as well. So it's really fantastic machine, and it must have cost a fortune too.
A lot of people may have this image of going back to traditionally farming is maybe a better way.
Yeah.
But realistically, from what you're telling us, it's just not sustainable. If you're supposed to, again, focus on not producing for yourself, but maybe a larger quantity, you just don't have time, and mostly time, right?
Yes.
To go through 500 kilos of rice and filter the debris hand by hand, right? You need to have a machine to do that.
Yeah. And I think that what kind of underpins that is the fact that rice and, well, most other food that we eat isn't priced adequately to reflect the amount of fossil fuels and time and energy that go into producing it. So, I mean, this is probably another reason why farming in Japan, maybe in other countries and regions around the world as well, is being aged out, is that young people can't be bothered because you can't make money doing it, right?
Well, like you said yourself, right? You're still working full-time mostly as a translator.
Yes.
And then you do rice because you love it and because you have the extra time from the flexibility of your main job.
Absolutely. And it's food. Food is the basis of civilization. So, I mean, you have to... and that's also why I got into hunting as well, because of food, right? And to be resilient for whatever lies ahead. But... the inputs to farming, modern farming, are largely obfuscated by the prices that we pay for the food, and that's really unfortunate because people tend to take farmed food for granted, and there seems to be a bias in Japan and probably other places around the world where farmers are kind of lower on the social status scale than other professions.
I think it's a big challenge that's coming for our societies too, because as you said, it's food, it's the basis of our lives, and we need it, and the absence of its production will lead to many other problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that is also currently happening a lot is climate change. You did say that hot summers tend to favor good production of rice.
Yes.
Do you see any other impacts of the changing climate we see in Japan with hotter summers? Maybe more rain than usual that is affecting in good and bad ways the rice production?
Because if you have more rain, more moisture, you'll have wetter conditions they tend to produce more disease in crops. You'll get mold that affects rice, and blight that completely eradicates rice fields. If there's too much rain, it's just as bad as a drought, if not worse.
So this is a big challenge. Are there any kind of discussions in the rice farmer communities around what can be done to mitigate the impacts of climate change and kind of keep up with the production? Or is there no solution yet?
Well, in my community, no, there's no discussion because it's rice farming where I live is looked at more as kind of almost like an artisan, craft. It's delinked from the larger kind of trends of climate change and maybe, depleting arable land, soil erosion. For instance, this summer, it was heartbreaking to see it, but there are wetlands on the other side of my rice field. And they were bulldozed. The wetlands were bulldozed by the Ministry of Land. And I think the rationale behind that was to kind of stop debris like trees and other vegetable debris from falling into the river and blocking it up further downstream. So they wanted to clear it. And what they do when they clear it, they turn it into sand and pebbles and rocks. And
eventually build housing sites on it.
Well, in this particular case, I think, because wetlands function to slow down the flow of water and filter it. And really, going back to what I mentioned before about the whole water irrigation question is, if you control the flow of water, you can control most other things in the world, in our ecosystem. So if you get rid of the natural service that wetlands offer, which is to slow down the water and to filter it out, then you're going to have accelerated water runoff, which takes soil. You have soil erosion, and you'll have agricultural chemical runoff into the larger watershed, and it flows downstream. It goes into cities, and that has the knock-on effect of putting a heavy burden on water treatment for people that live in the city. And you have the phenomenon of eutrophication that works. Too much nitrogen outflow into large bodies of water, including the oceans, produce like stifling amounts of like red algae and things that just choke off the natural ecosystem around that. And there's really, it's
very complex.
It is complex, and you can't calculate what will happen further down the line, right? So, there wasn't, when they kind of bulldozed that marshland, those wetlands, it didn't seem to me like there was much thought put into it. They were just thinking for the short term of just stopping debris from flowing down into the river.
Well, I think we got a good overview of rice production, the challenges, and you mentioned towards the end, which was, I think, a good transition also, that you got interested into hunting as well.
Yes.
With regards of food production and what got you into hunting in the first place?
Again, the same resourceful, kind foreigner that lives near me introduced me to my local hunt club. And so I met them, and we started to get along really well. And I had never hunted in Canada. I'd never owned a gun, never shot a gun. But I wasn't averse to it. I'd actually, because I have chickens at home, and I've killed and ate some of my chickens in the past. So I'm not averse to taking animal life, and as long as it's to sustain me and my family. But I realized after rice farming, the wildlife here is a constant, I don't want to say battle. I don't want to analogize it to a war.
There needs to be a balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the balance is always tilting either way.
Right. And right now, the aging out of farmers and the kind of hollowing out of the whole agriculture system in the hinterlands is really, it's becoming a problem because animals are coming in and taking the free food, right? You've got monkeys coming in, stealing from people's orchards and even from personal gardens and whatnot. You've got deer coming in, eating rice, deer strip bark off of trees. They kill massive swaths of forest because they eat the bark off the trees. Boar.
That fight the police officers in
yes,
cities.
you saw that, did you?
I saw that video of 4 officers trying
something.
to stop the boar with little sticks and kind of pushed over.
Yeah,
the boar is strong.
Very strong, and they have tusks, kiba, that can actually rip into your leg. They're at the same height as your femoral artery in your leg.
If they hit that, it's not looking good.
You bleed out. Yeah.
So there's a need for balance. So there's a need for hunters in Japan to keep that balance.
Yeah.
But Japan, one of the things you will need to hunt is a gun, right? And Japan is quite strict on gun regulations. You can't just buy one anywhere. You can't just own it like that.
No.
Once you got close to this hunting club, your local hunting club, and befriended the people working there and decided that, okay, I want to get into this. I want to do more. What were the steps for you to get a license, obtain your gun, and be legally allowed to hunt in Japan?
It comes down to being able to earn trust of the locals where you are. And that, of course, if you can speak Japanese, it helps so much to win that trust, to earn it. So if you earn the trust of the locals, it opens up the doors. So when I joined this hunting club, I walked with them through the mountains. We do a type of hunt style called makigari. Makigari involves having ambush hunters that have rifles that sit and wait. They're called tatsuma. And then it has a driving team. They're called sekochimu. Excuse me. And sekochimu will enter the mountain from the top with dogs sometimes, noisemakers, guns as well. And we will drive any animals that are hiding in the mountains. We'll drive them down to where the tatsuma can shoot them. So I walked with the sekochimu last year. I walked with them. It's very frigid winters in the mountains.
It's cold.
Yeah, very cold.
And dry.
Yeah, and dry. But when you're moving though, you sweat. But if you sit still and you're sweaty, it makes it so much worse. Hypothermia can take you so easily out there. So I walked with them and multiple occasions, almost every weekend last year during the hunt season, which goes from November 15th to March 15th. And just walking with them and then interacting with them afterwards, eating with them, having a good laugh. That was what allowed me to earn their trust. So after earning their trust for a year, I got the kaicho of my hunt club and the fuku kaicho, the president and the vice president of my hunt club, to endorse me to get a
letter of recommendation, basically.
Yes, to get a gun. And you need that. But prior to that, you have to get a hunting license. So I got a hunting license to trap. That's less regulated, not as tightly regulated as the gun, but it's still regulated. So I got a trapping license the summer of last year, and then I immediately started trapping. And we use wire snares, but for the most part. Some people use larger kind of wire cages, but mostly it's wire snares, which wrap around the feet.
And then basically the animal is stuck there.
Yeah, immobilized, yeah. So I got my trapper's license first, and then when you get your trapper's license, you have to really... Yeah,
you brought some books
I brought some of my books here.
So this is the guidebook to becoming a hunter.
Yes.
A hunter textbook.
Yeah. So
which starts with images of ducks and a lot of... Okay.
Yeah, and you've got images of all of the main...
Wildlife in Japan.
Wildlife, the fauna here. and
quite diverse.
It is quite diverse. You have to memorize these, and there's a test where it'll show on screen for 5 seconds, and you say, that's Nihonzaru, and then whether you can take it or not. Torimasu, torimasen.
So for example, I see a little cross next to the squirrel up there. That means you're not allowed to shoot that one.
Torimasen, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's that's a very small component of it, and the rest is you have to learn regulations. You have to learn trapping techniques. You have to learn footprints, and everything. And then there's also a demonstration test where, in front of an instructor, you show how you set up the wire snare.
So this is only for you to get the license to trap.
Yes.
So it's a hunting license, but since you don't have the gun license yet, you are only allowed to trap.
That's right. Yeah.
So once you pass this exam, after having you are allowed to kind of set those traps.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do this by yourself, or do you always need to be part of a club and do it together with other hunters?
I think it's encouraged to be part of the club, but I'm not sure if it's a necessity or not. But if you do get a gun, you have to be part of a club.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I trapped for a while, and I knew then that I really enjoyed hunting. It kind of completed my idea of resilience and food sustainability and whatnot. So I decided to go the next level, and I wanted to get a gun. So when you get a gun in Japan, there's the gun hunting license, which is separate from the police license.
Okay.
So there's two different aspects. So the gun hunting license, you again have to memorize this book, and then you have to do a demonstration in front of veteran hunters of how to operate a gun and how to carry a gun if you're with others, and things like that.
Is it also supervised by the police, or is it supervised just by the Hunters Association of Japan?
Yeah, that's supervised by the Dai Nippon Ryoryukai, the Japanese Hunters Association. So, but that doesn't legally allow you to carry a gun. It's a prerequisite, but it's not.
Interesting.
Yeah. What you have to do is you have to apply to your prefectural Koan Iinkai, which is the Public Safety Commission, which is basically the police. And you have to pass a true and false test. It's 50 questions. And if you get 45 or more correct, then it's considered a pass.
No, that's exactly the same as back then the theory test for the driving license in France, where I grew up. Yeah, you had 50 questions. You are allowed to do 5 mistakes.
Yeah,
tops.
Yeah. So the test is all in Japanese, and there are hikkake mondai. There are trick questions that come up on it. So.
As I like to do them.
Yeah. So you have to, you have to know the nuance between mimang, no more than, or sorry, less than, or ika,
beneath.
Yeah, beneath, but including. So you can only store 800 rounds in your house at any single time. So 800 hatsu mimang hokan shite mo ii. You can only store. You're allowed to store less than 800 rounds, but that's a trick question. You have to, it should say 800 hatsu ika hokan shite mo ii. So the ika includes the 800 rounds.
And the other one is like 799.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
that's very tricky.
Yeah, it's very tricky. So there are questions like that, and it's to weed out the people that don't have the attention to detail. So.
Because if you own a gun, you can.
You have to be fastidious. You have to be careful, and because it's a deadly weapon, and they realize that. So it's rigorous. It's, but the actual practical training, there is so you do the written test, you pass the written test, then you move on to the next stage, which is the range test. So you go to the range. And
there you have to kind of practice shooting different types of rifles or guns, or is it categorized?
Just shotguns. You can only, in Japan, you can only get a shotgun as your hunting gun for the first 10 years. And then after you've had a shotgun for 10 years, you can graduate to a rifle. Yeah.
That's a long time to graduate. Yeah.
Yeah. So the range test is a little bit more lax than the written test. So you have to shoot clay pigeons, which are launched. Mm-hmm. And so you get ready. And
so it's like the sport.
It is.
Sports shooting.
It is. And what was it? 20 shots. 25 clay pigeons. You only have to shoot 3. You only have to hit 3.
But I can imagine it's quite hard because if you look at, I don't know if it's in the Olympics, but I remember seeing sports shooting and the little, they shoot like plates, discs. Yeah. They are shot so fast, you don't know exactly where they're flying. You have to adjust, aim, shoot within like 1 second.
It is.
So hitting 3 already must be quite a challenge.
But luckily for the range test, they know how difficult it is to hit clay. So they just launch very slow in a straight line.
I see.
So all you have to do, you only have to worry about your up and down level. You don't have to worry about your swing. So I hit 17. So I was,
Congrats.
Yeah, I know.
So once you have this license,
Pure
you passed the theory, you passed the practice test, you have the license. I imagine the places where you are allowed to purchase guns are very limited. And once you have a gun, you need to register it with the police, let them know. And I will assume that you have to also have it stored in a safe place at home.
Yes.
Do they also come regularly check that the gun is still stored properly? Or
No, they don't come regularly. During the process, once you pass the range test, you go to the police station and you basically get interviewed by the police. They ask your intentions behind getting a gun. They ask for the names and addresses and contact of those the people that are willing to vouch for you. They basically kind of grill you. And when they grill you, the officer that I had grilling me, he was nice at first, but then he's got this very serious look, and he looks you straight in the eye, and he says, "Kiyotsukete kudasai."
Be careful. I'm watching you.
Yeah, exactly. So you can feel the intimidation factor. But so after you do the interview, they say, okay, well, we're going to come by your house and we're going to inspect where you are going to keep your gun safe and your ammo safe, because they have to be in different rooms. Ideally, they should be on different floors, but I have a larger house, so they allowed me to keep it on the same floor. So I got one in my office, my gun safe in my office, and I've got my ammo safe in my closet in my bedroom. So he came in, made sure I had my gun safe. It's bolted to the wall, and my ammo safe is also bolted to the wall, and it's all to spec. The hinges are inside, so you can't, take it off. And so once that's done, they do a background check. So they want to know your address, all your addresses where you've lived for the past 10 years. Very thorough. And when I got my gun, it was this year I got my gun. When I got it, I'd been in Japan for 9 years.
Consecutively?
Yes. So prior to that, we were in Ottawa. So I just gave them my Ottawa address, and I don't have a record, but I don't think that they followed up on the Canadian address. Yeah.
So now back to hunting.
Yes.
You're fully equipped. You're allowed to trap. You're allowed to hunt.
Yes.
What are the typical animals that will be hunted in your region?
Okay. Shika, deer, and inoshishi, boar.
Are the most common.
Most common. In my particular region, I don't know if I should say this because it'll give it away where I live, but you can shoot monkeys where I live. There's very few places in Japan you can actually shoot monkeys.
You mean legally shoot them?
Okay. Yeah, legally, yeah. Like, because they're considered...
invasive?
No.
Aggressive?
Tennen kinenbutsu, kinen dobutsu.
So dangerous animals?
No. They're natural... they're like a... they're like
natural predator to
commemorative animal of Japan, or they're representative of Japan, right?
I was completely off here with my Japanese.
Okay.
Yeah, but got some words to study.
But they're so invasive and so aggressive where I live that there's a bounty on them. They need to be shot in order to get that balance back.
And everything that is being hunted is processed for food as well.
Yes, but I don't eat monkeys.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's my kind of my limit.
But generally speaking,
Yeah.
In Japan, when you hunt, it's not just a killed animal; it's an animal that is going to be used for food.
Yes, absolutely. And lately, I've actually been thinking about getting into leather work because I wanted to work with some deer pelts and see if I can, make things with deer pelts. And you can actually shoot bear in Japan if you get permission from the prefecture. If you get the advance permission from the prefecture, there's a tag limit that you can get, and there's also limits for deer and boar and monkeys as well. But those are so excessive, so far out there that no one can possibly get their quota.
Bear appearances have been more and more frequent recently. Regularly, I see on the news a bear wandering through the streets of a town in Akita, injuring 10 people.
Yes.
Or there was a mushroom gatherer who defended himself bravely against a bear who was probably just curious and just as scared as him. But is this getting more common? Is this becoming dangerous also?
One of the members of my hunt club was attacked by a bear last year. Slashed his face.
Oh no!
Yeah, he was on Sekochimu, the driving team. He didn't have a gun. He was in the same position that I was, and he was walking, and a bear came out of because you're making a lot of noise when you're on Sekochimu, and it must have shocked the bear who was sleeping in the tall grass. Came out and slashed him, and then ran off. But I've never encountered a bear in the mountains, and I've been pretty deep. And I've got my dog with me as well. And I mean, she's not much use for hunting deer, but she's like my perimeter defense. She scares away all the animals that are close to me. So I think she would probably spot a bear for me if there was one.
Bears are interesting. I encountered a cub once. I was doing the Kumano Kodo. It's like a traditional trail in Wakayama. And he was just crossing the path, so we just wait for him to leave, and probably his mom is not far away. But
that is scary.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how scary it can actually be, right? If you don't, you see videos, but you don't. It's hard to imagine that the bear's gonna jump at you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with bears encounters in Japan, they tend to attack when they get surprised. So if you encounter a bear, the best thing to do is to speak quietly. Don't be actively aggressive, but maybe hold your hands up and say, hey bear, just so it knows that you're there. And, slowly back away. Don't run. Slowly back away. And, but, it's, I think there's a major food problem in the mountains for bears. I remember last year, we encountered bears when they should have been hibernating when our hunt club was doing our mountain hunt.
So you're saying that they are not able to store enough food for the hibernation period, and so they kind of keep hunting until later in the year, November, when you start the hunting season, maybe a decade ago they would have already been sleeping.
Now I don't know if it's like some sort of indication that there's some sort of breakdown in the ecology deep in the mountains, that they're not able to access their normal food sources. They have to come down from the mountain to, pillage human food. But because things are changing like that, people should definitely take notice.
When you go out hunting, usually, so the season is from November to March, which fits perfectly with your rice season, right? Rice farming season.
Yes.
Do you go every day? Is it like on a weekend, and you just go out for one day, and the hunting club goes?
My hunting club goes every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And when I'm free, I go with them to do the group hunting. But this season, I'm going to still do that. But if I get any free time, I'll go out by myself as well. One thing I noticed last year when we had freshly fallen snow is that you can track deer and other animals through the snow. It makes it so much easier. I can read tracks on the ground in mud and whatnot, but when it's fresh snow,
in the snow, much
they're
to
nearby.
follow.
Yeah.
Once you shoot an animal, do you have to kind of report it somewhere? Is there like a sort of system where they try to keep track of which hunter, which hunting group kills how many animals to kind of keep that balance you were talking about at the beginning?
Yeah, you are supposed to report it. The incentive is there are bounties on deer and wild boar. It's 15,000 yen
For each.
Yeah. You got to take the tail. There's no kind of obligation about what, eating the body or eating the flesh or what to do with the body or whatnot. But they say you should bury it. If you're deep in the mountains, covered over with debris. But we typically will take it off the mountain, load it in the K truck, drive it to another place where we have a burial site. Our hunt club has a burial site, and we'll dispose of the body there. And then every year, we bury it and redig another site, and we have a little ceremony with incense and whatnot. And
are there really that many that they can't all be processed for food, for example?
Well, I mean, yes, because if you trap one deer a week, you'll have more meat than you know what to do with. I mean, if it's a decent sized deer, if it's like a 40, 50 kilogram deer, your freezer's going to fill up fast. And if you're out there, there's only so many people that you can give the meat to. But the monkey bounty is 25,000 yen. So there's more financial incentive to go after monkeys.
So hunting seems to be more lucrative than farming, nearly.
It is, I don't do it for the money. I do it for the food, and I really enjoy hiking through the mountains with my dog. That's what I do it for. But it did cost actually a lot of money to do my tests, my trapping tests.
Because all the tests are not free, right?
They're not free.
No.
Guns aren't free. Ammo's not free. The ammo safe and the gun safe alone cost me like 50,000 yen. So So I've earned back everything I put into it now. So it's just going to be the icing on the cake from this point on.
So as you move back from Canada to Japan and kind of settling in the countryside, getting into rice farming through a friend who introduced you to an old man, kind of got you into the community, who also introduced you to the hunting club and to this hunting community. How do you feel like your perspective on life in Japan has changed now that you are part of this rural community, producing food by yourself with the traditional rice and traditional hunting, and that has been done in Japan for a long time?
Yeah.
Compared to when you first arrived and were like exchange students or anything?
Yeah. Like when you're fresh off the boat, especially if you're an exchange student or something, it's usually about partying and being foolish and selfish and taking advantage of Japanese people and their the way they tend to be non-confrontational and whatnot. We've seen that with these streamers recently. They've been a problem.
It's been quite a big issue. Yeah.
So just like you learn as you integrate into the community, you learn to lose the selfishness, and you learn to appreciate the fact that community is what sustains you. You can't just live an anonymous life when you're out there with all these people, because they're watching you. They not in some ominous sense. They're not, we're watching you, but things don't go unnoticed, right? There's that aspect as well, and there's also the aspect of conviviality. There's being able to enjoy the positive aspects of community, which is just when you have your own group and you feel at ease with them, and you're interested in the same thing, you have the same goals and whatnot, and if you have that conviviality, it makes life so much more rich.
And this is really an experience you've been able to get more in a countryside by being involved with locals, as opposed to kind of the city office job life.
Yes, by far. I remember working in Tokyo, just going on the train each day, the Yamanote-sen, and then Tokaido-sen to go down to Yokohama, and it's you live in this anonymous kind of space. It's familiar, but familiar in a very kind of distant, cold way. And I think maybe that's why drinking culture is so strong in Japan, is that, I mean, there's obviously other reasons as well, but, you know, the idea of being able to find something in common and get together with people to overcome maybe the sense of loneliness that you could get living in the city, right? So I don't get lonely in the country. I enjoy my solitude in the mountains, or whether, you know, it's in the mountains or at home on my computer in my office or whatnot, or out chopping wood, or, you know, spending time in the fields or whatnot. I enjoy my loneliness, but I always know that there's a community of people that they're kind of built on this ethic of mutual aid, that they'll come to help you if you need it. And it's a cushion. It's a cushion that you feel underneath you that lifts you up. And yeah, that's something I never felt in the city.
It seems like you found your place.
I hope so.
And with all the things you've been kind of getting into, developing your own rice farming, learning about it, getting into hunting, trap hunting, gun license, what other things that you want to do now in the coming years that you mentioned, for example, working with leather?
Yes.
Are there other, like...
I'm interested in carpentry.
Oh.
I've always wanted to build furniture, not for any kind of commercial purpose, just I've wanted to put my mind and my hands into something that I have this finished product that is, wood is always warm. It's a warm, familiar texture to the human touch. Society was built on wood, from the Jomon period to now. We've always had wooden structures, right? We've always used wood to build things. And wood is such a versatile material to work with. And I really appreciate it. And I wish I had more time to devote to woodworking. And it's something I would like to do in the future.
That makes me think about a few things you mentioned earlier. So these are a lot of very manual crafts that you're getting interested in, this idea of kind of going back to a simpler kind of way of doing things with your hands, producing products. And one of the common challenges you mentioned was it's hardly profitable, especially for the younger generation, to get into this. So a lot of it is being lost: rice farming, hunting, carpentry perhaps as well. What would you say would be necessary to change so that you see a higher influx of young people going to the countryside, picking up farming, as the government is trying to do, is asking people to do, get out of the cities, go back to the country, but it's not happening. What, in your experience, having lived in a city, having settled in the countryside, would need to change for young people to actually go there? Perhaps too deep of a question, but... it's a completely intriguing and valid question. I think it's either pain or pleasure, in a very general sense. They either have to experience the difficulties of not having enough to eat, or having runaway inflation take away their labor value. Or it has to be pleasure that they find themselves in being able to do something for themselves and for those around them. That, it has to be one of those two factors, because if, I have kind of a bias against people who live in the city. I look at them as... You're talking to one?
Yeah. I look at them as almost hedonistic, nihilistic in a sense, because people that live in the city rely, whether they want to recognize it or not, they rely on the people that live in the country. And I guess society has been transformed in a way, maybe intransitively and transitively. It has been transformed, and it has transformed into the reverse of what it should be, where consumers are held aloft. If you have an expensive car, and a new house, and what other trinkets that you can accumulate. What do you get out of it in the end, right? There's kind of and that's why I say nihilistic in a way, because there's just kind of a vacuity. There's a hollowness to accumulating these trinkets. And then, of course, the hedonism comes from the amount of restaurants, just like in Nagoya, which I passed through, and Osaka here, and
known for food.
Yeah, just the amount of restaurants and drinking areas. I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the niceties of life, of being able to go out and enjoy fine cuisine, or nice drink and good company. I'm not speaking ill of that. What I think is that if that's the only
goal
or pastime or purpose that you can find, I think that maybe it's probably time to reevaluate.
Well, thank you for sharing a very philosophical take on life from your experience in both sides of city life and country life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stinton, as well, for sharing so much about your experience farming rice, bringing us some of your beautiful rice, and your experience with getting into hunting in Japan. Do you feel like there's a topic we haven't covered that you would have liked to maybe explore a little bit more? Or do you think we've got a good impression of...
I mean, I could wax poetically on current events and global affairs, because I did a PhD in international relations, and I got the dreaded ABD status, all but dissertation status. So I completed the coursework, I just didn't finish my dissertation. So I mean, I learned a lot about global politics, and the more I learned about it, the more I hated it. The more I wanted to go back to simplicity, because there's an overcomplexification of social life right now. And I think, obviously social media has that's the latest incarnation of it. But I mean, it goes further back, like all of the kind of the trend towards ideological formations of, liberalism and conservatism and, fascism. I consider myself an anarchist. So that's an entirely different topic. It's probably, best for the next show if we do one.
Yeah, it will be great to have you back. But I think on the last thing you said, perhaps then the direction the society is taking could be reevaluated by a small example you gave us earlier about schools bringing children into the rice farms and kind of going back to showing them what you can do and showing them the results of what you do. And perhaps that realization and that joy, you said it's either pain or pleasure. Yeah. That pleasure of producing this may make a lot of younger people, the younger generation, interested back into a different way of life.
I hope
as our society is going to right now.
Yeah, I really do think that the younger generation has been alienated from their food. And if they were to understand where their food comes from, I think there would be a natural interest that takes hold of them. I think it's innate. I don't think anyone is just, was born not wanting to learn where their food came from. They've just been kind of pigeonholed down that alleyway. And if there is a drive for anything in a human being, it's probably to produce something for yourself and for the people you love.
I think this is perfect to end this episode of Unpacking Japan. Thank you, Stinton, for sharing so much with us and giving us an insight into what it's like to go back to producing food and how it works in Japan. Hopefully a lot of our listeners and viewers have found this as interesting as I did and may be interested in going to experience this for ourselves.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
This was Unpacking Japan. We'll see you again next week. Bye.